Welcome to the Music Makers Cookbook, the podcast that helps independent artists cook up recipes for success in the music industry. I'm Sean.
I'm Brandon.
And once again, we are joined by our good friend, Joe.
Joe!
Hey. If you missed out the first episode that he was on, we talked about stage plots and load-in. Because he's a live sound engineer with tons of experience working from small to medium to decent-sized venues in this area. So he's just worked with a lot of awesome people and has a lot of experience.
And he's an awesome person.
He's also damn good at what he does.
Wow. I only go as high as decent-sized venues. I haven't gotten to the big venues yet. It's only decent-sized.
Gotcha. I am sorry. I overhyped you. My bad.
I'm just kidding.
He's also a huge Behringer wing stan.
Okay.
New case
Am
today.
I wrong?
No, you're not.
You get the new case today, so that's
I do.
cool.
That's
I'm
true.
very excited.
It is, albeit a very cool board.
Yes.
Honestly, for the price, it punches above its weight.
It really
as far as my
does.
understanding.
Yeah.
That's enough engineers kind of nerding.
If Behringer wants to sponsor this episode and send me another wing, that would...
He could go for a third. He's talking to you. But yeah, no. Last time we said we talked about stage plots and load-in. Today we're going to be talking about the monitor world, which is the world that you're most familiar with.
Yep.
Most gigs you do, you're the monitor engineer, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Cool. All right. So before we jump into that, I'm going to first ask a question. I forgot to ask a question of the week at the beginning of the last episode. Usually we do that. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
So the question today, we're maybe not going to answer it the best, but if you're listening to this, you definitely will. And you definitely will as well. And that is floor wedges or in your monitors? Or another way to ask it, no feedback or feedback? Now I might be tipping my hand a little bit.
Yeah. I'm definitely in-ears all the way.
Yeah. All the way.
But I definitely think, as we'll get into, there are ways of making sure you're not getting feedback. It only goes so far.
Sure.
You can truly maximize gain before feedback if you're running in-ears. It negates a lot of abilities for feedback to happen, but I am definitely still at ears all the way. The day that humanity leaves wedges behind will truly be a very good day for mankind.
There are a ton of benefits to it.
Yes.
In terms of an audio fidelity standpoint, in terms of a setup and teardown standpoint, in terms of dialing in exactly what you need in a mix, which is the main focus of what do you need in the mix. And if you have someone like a Joe on the side of the stage who is whole point of being there is to make sure you've got a great sounding monitor mix so that you can just focus on your performance and not worry about not hearing anything. How do you communicate that? And what are some things to think about if, I need this, but it's actually something else that you need. You just maybe don't know it yet. So I guess like with that, we'll just kind of dive right into it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So as a monitor engineer, my responsibility is to make sure that the artists on stage can hear the music that they're performing. And it's as simple as that, I feel like. That's the point that I always come back to. What do they need to be hearing? And a lot of times what the artist is telling you they need to hear might not actually be what they need to hear.
So if someone walks up to you and says, I just want a little bit of everything, do you believe them?
Oh, no. if it's in-ears, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But if this is floor wedges, which most of the time this is what I'm mixing on, you don't need everything. You don't need overheads in your wedges most of the time.
No.
Yeah,
Especially
right.
A drummer that hits the cymbals.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's actually a common joke that, or a nice icebreaker that I'll use on festivals. Sometimes I'll say to everybody, okay, a little bit of snare in the wedge across the front. Everybody can hear the snare on the stage.
It doesn't stop them from asking for snare in the wedge.
It doesn't. Yeah. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, this episode might be a little brutal because we're all engineers here. Where it's a peek behind the curtain, and we're going to be complaining about you just a little bit.
Yeah,
especially if you do one of these things
very lovingly.
Yes,
of course.
And we're going to tell you why we complain about it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Because what does putting snare in the front wedges do?
I've had some people ask for the attack of the snare. And in that case, I'm probably going to heavily process the snare. I'm probably going to gate it to the point where you're just getting the attack.
Yep.
Because not only are you sending, especially if the front vocalist wants snare in the wedge, or they want all these different things in their wedge, I'm getting very particular about how I'm processing each channel, because I know that is also getting blasted to the mic to some extent. If you're utilizing proper
58.
Proper mic placement with a wedge, you should have this part of the 58, if you're using a 58, pointed directly at the wedge, because this is a null or a spot where the microphone doesn't pick up. With that said, especially on smaller stages that I work on, your sound is just bouncing all over the stage.
Beer tents, it's horrible with. Small stages, low venues, bars. These are all horrible spaces for allowing for the microphone to do its job and just pick up the source. It goes everywhere.
One of the venues I work at has a curved ceiling at the top, and the wedges across the front I've measured match pretty perfectly with that curve. So they're just blasting noise up into this curve, which is then just propagating throughout the stage, which just makes for a noisier stage, because mics are then picking that up, and sometimes that could be feeding it back into the wedge. Just introducing signal into the wedge that doesn't need to be there. The artist just needs to hear, like, again, if they ask for snare, they want to hear the snare. They might just want to hear that attack. Keep in mind that mic, probably, let's say a 57, SM57, might also be picking up some hi-hat, might also be picking up some of the toms, might also be picking up some of the cymbals. So you're also sending all that to the wedge.
Right.
So the best way to communicate might be like, what part of the snare are you looking for? Are you looking for the whole thing? Are you looking for just the crack? Are you looking for just the body? And sometimes they don't know the answer, which is okay.
Sure.
It definitely makes the job a bit harder, but sometimes I would start with what my best guess would be. And in that scenario would be they just need the attack. And if they don't ask for anything else beyond that, you just move on.
Yeah.
A lot of times, kick drums, I'll have a lot of different takes on how the kick drum should sound in the wedge. Some people want that really subby, really low end stuff, and some people want that, like
the click,
the thump.
Oh, the thump. Gotcha.
The thump. I have a lot of bassists ask for that. Actually, drummers as well. That a lot of times, for metal drummers, that might be the only thing I'm feeding into their wedge. They might want a little bit of vocal or whatever, but kick drum is very important. And other times it might just be the click of the kick drum. So it's somebody might say they want kick drum. The answer to that might be a little more intensive than just, okay, sure, here's some kick drum.
Here's a quick pause to remind you that if you're enjoying the insights of today's episode, please click subscribe or follow us so that you're always in the loop as to what's happening at the Music Makers Cookbook.
And if you're loving what we're cooking up, a rating or review helps us reach more independent artists just like you. Thank you for listening to Music Makers Cookbook.
Now back to the show.
So, like I said before in the last episode, I'm pretty ignorant to the whole live sound thing, right? But so for like monitoring, it's purely utility mixes, right? Like you're doing it for a purpose, but it's not to sound great. Like you're not making a record on a fucking monitor mix, right? You're doing what you need to do to get the band to feel what they need to hear and feel, rather than actually hear what the actual sound is, kind of, right?
Yes and no, because sometimes getting them what they need to feel is a very processed mix. So you might, if they need something a little more processed, you might look at working in a post fader configuration in your setup. And for our viewers who might not know what that is, the way that a monitor console works is you're making multiple mixes from the same inputs. So you're taking the aux copies of each channel and basically sending them to, let's say, 4 different mixes at a time. So you can send multiple copies of the same channel to multiple places. And you can pick at which point in the signal chain that channel is getting sent, whether it is before the fader and you'll get all the processing, or maybe you just want the preamp level, and maybe that's just what you want to send to the wedge. Maybe you want to get it after the EQ and send that to the wedge. But if you were to get all sorts of processing on it, you might want to start with a basic blanket processed like front of house style mix.
Okay.
And then send that to the wedges that way.
Gotcha.
But it also depends on what band you're working with. There are some times where I've done DJ nights where all it is, it's just, okay, there's your level.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that, or other days it's as intensive as, I need a little bit less of like the mids out of my vocal a little bit. It's too much, especially if they're in ears. I'm EQing vocals completely different. Yeah. So
let's just kind of break down what a live performance is on the engineering side of it. Obviously, there's the performance aspect. There is what you do as the artist. You get on stage, you perform, you make it a good show. On the engineering side of it, it's kind of a dual front approach. There is the front of house mix and the monitor mix. And when done correctly, or when you're using ears or things like that, which we'll dive into later, it can be a pretty separate thing where they both do their own job. But in certain situations, especially when you have to put a lot of noise through a 4-monitor setup, then they're actually working kind of against each other. The front of house job is to take all the sources and mix it so it sounds great to the audience. And to do that, clear sources, quality, like mic placement, recording, like capturing the sound in a way that best represents your music is the end goal. And a lot of times it's incredibly helpful to have as clean of a source to do that. So that way, if you push up a guitar, you're not getting too much of the other guitar going up as well. Otherwise, if you're moving up the snare and it's got more hi-hat than the snare, now it's just harder for the front of house engineer to do their job. So good stage engineer, front of house guy will know how to mic it up to minimize that, which is what is called bleed. Now, what the monitoring engineer is setting up something to help you clearly hear what you need to hear to just focus on that performance. So you can hear when the guitar ends his solo, so you can hop in on your solo or play off of each other and, have a good time on stage to help aid in a better performance for your fans, for the people in the venue. But as we mentioned earlier, if you are doing floor wedges and you need snare, as you alluded to, sometimes the hi-hat creeps in on there. And as you mentioned, if the microphone, it has a rejection zone, and if it's set up on a stand and it's right there, it's as good as you can get, it's going to isolate. But if you pick it up, you move around, or you drop the microphone on your side while you're doing stuff or things like that, it is going to pick up other sources. You are going to get bleed, which in turn is going to come back through the monitors and make more sound on stage. It is always a goal to have as little stage volume as possible for both the front of house engineer and the monitor engineer, which is why, especially if you're using wedges, it is incredibly important to take some time to think about, what do I actually need to hear?
100%.
And be able to communicate that to the engineer, because their job is to help you, but their job is also to make sure it sounds great out there. And there are some things that they just might not be able to do. So like, let's say you have an acoustic guitar and your lead guitar and your rhythm guitar and keys, and you want all of that in your wedge, and you're the lead singer and you're got all this noise coming through your monitor, but they have amps on stage, so there is stage volume and things like that going on. All of a sudden, because of what you have coming out of your monitor, you can't hear the snare. So now you need more snare, because you put
turn
too
up
much
the
noise.
snare, and now your guitar's getting drowned out, and then you turn up the guitar, and it can turn into this endless game of just turning things up. When in reality, people should, I think, sit down, maybe have, if you're a band, have some rehearsal time with your band and really play around with this. Like, what do I need to hear for this part of the song? What does each song require? You might need a little bit of, you might be playing with another guitar player. And you might need to hear where they are before you go into a solo, before they go into solo, so nobody's stepping on each other. I have a lot of time, the bassist wants a lot more drum stuff in their monitor as opposed to guitar stuff, so they can keep up with them rhythmically. The one consistency across all performance I seem to hear is vocals. That is always my most important channel that I'm working with are the lead vocals. Because that is the channel that, in my experience, has always been most prone to feedback, which is that very loud, shrill noise that nobody likes to hear. And that's happening because of exactly that. It's too much unnecessary noise getting fed through the wedge, or too much signal in general that mic is picking up, then feeding back into the wedge, then picking up. Yeah.
Well, that and then the vocal mic is really the only mic that's going to be moving during the performance. If you have a vocalist
Sometimes,
walking around on stage, you know, that becomes an issue within itself, right? Yeah.
So being very conscious of where you're pointing that mic, don't cup the head of the mic like this.
This changes the polar pattern.
Yes, it does.
Which is what Joe was talking about earlier. It makes it more likely to feedback.
Yes.
But it looks cooler though.
Does not sound better. I'll tell you that.
No.
Does not.
So if you don't mind, I would like to kind of dive into some best practices of things you can do, the musicians can do on their end to hear what they need to hear, but also allow the monitor engineer to focus on what actually needs to be done and not go through and process things to overall fix problems to help keep a quiet stage as possible. If you need the lead guitarist and you're the rhythm guitarist and you're right next to him, you might say, okay, I need a lead guitar in my wedge, but you could also ask your lead guitarist to angle his amp so it's facing you more direction, or it creates more of a side fill effect than blasting right to front of house. Or you put it on a amp stand so it angles upwards, so it hits your ears versus hitting your feet. All of these small steps allow the instrument itself that is making stage volume to clearly be heard by you instead of having to create another source of volume that then affects everything else on stage. Another thing is, if you're a bassist, where you stand, maybe you need to be on the left of the drummer, close to the hi-hat, so that you have a better sound. If you're on the opposite side of the drum kit, it might be hard to hear the hi-hat, so you can't hear the rhythm as much. You need a lot of drums in your wedge. The closer you can get, the more on the main holy trinity of the drums, the kick, snare, and the hi-hat, the easier it is to hear it, to play along with them without needing to put more sound on the stage. Are there any other best practices that you can think of?
The number one thing that I learned definitely the hard way, because I did not go to school for live sound. I did more studio stuff, but found myself in live sound. So a lot of stuff I learned about feedback has just been from working.
Experience is the best teacher.
Exactly. And the main thing that I found is if your mic placement is not positioned properly, you can do as much stuff on the back end as possible, and it's only going to fix it so much. If your wedge is not properly positioned, that you're in for a world of pain. So making sure that you're using a cardioid mic with the wedge positioned in the null of that mic, or if you're using, sometimes we'll have beta 58s come through, which are hypercardioid.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, hyper or supercardioid, but either way, it means that they will have a pickup on the tail where the null is on the cardioid mics. So you might position a wedge over here, angled at the null, which is about right here, or on this side over here. You might have even two wedges.
So what you're saying is, if the engineer positions a mic in a certain way and you take the stage as an artist, move the microphone. No, don't move the microphone. Or if you feel like, oh, I normally put it here because it sounds better,
Just
this is the sweet spot, let the guy know.
Yeah, communicate with the engineer about that. Be aware that the microphone is positioned that way for a reason. If you're moving around, that's one thing. They will deal with it. But also keep in mind that that's what happens when you move around your mic on stage. And again, be very aware of how you're positioning the mic. Don't go around waving it at the wedge, even though the engineer, if given proper time, will have carved out that wedge with different frequencies to make sure that it does not feedback.
But especially in a live setting where you're just going, that's not something you can consistently rely on.
It's a luxury in some situations for sure. And also, as an artist, just again be aware of that's what could happen. So unless you want squelching feedback coming up very constantly. Just be very mindful of that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and when a monitor engineer tells you that you can't get to a certain point, or I can't give you any more because of this, just keep that in mind too. That's why.
Yeah.
So,
That is a thing that, at least my experience, happens often where an artist will need more of this, more of that. And they get to the point where the engineer has to say, I can't give you any more. You're maxed out here.
Yeah.
So the next step, if you're in that position, would be to think of, okay, I know this now. I can't get more. What am I hearing too much of?
Yeah.
I'm not hearing the electric guitar. Well, I'm hearing a lot of my acoustic. So maybe just bring the acoustic down so I can hear the electric better. Now, obviously, sometimes there's only so much that can be done, even on your end. Sometimes it's just not an optimal environment, like in a beer tent, where, man, they just resonate and they create feedback super easily.
Yep.
But it's something to think about of, well, I know I need this and I'm not getting it. So what is in the way? Or what is a way that can be communicated to, no, this is important. So let's take some time to say, how can we make this work so I can hear this part of the performance? And work with your engineer with it.
Another very important thing I'd like to say, getting close to the mic is the best way to get more gain. I've had a lot of guys, they'll talk back here like this, and it's really quiet, sounds really distant. And they're like, why can't I hear it in my monitor? And then they'll get really close to the mic and it'll just explode. But yeah, especially if you're using like a 58, just make sure you're addressing it very close.
Live mics are built for that. They are meant to be close and only pick up what's there and reject everything else, because that's how you protect from feedback.
As an engineer, I'd rather you be kissing the mic than holding it down here. That's a huge thing. Another trick that I've been experimenting with lately is if you're a monitor engineer and you have the channel count for this, duplicating the main vocal and making separate EQ changes to this duplicate, and that's what you send to the lead vocal wedge. So sometimes I will what's called ring out a wedge, which is basically I'll go up to a mic and make all sorts of horrible noise with the wedge, turn the gain up really high, and just wave it at the wedge, and you'll hear specific frequencies start to take off. And then I'll go to a graphic EQ, kind of start carving that stuff out, or a parametric. I've found copying that and actually applying that to this duplicate vocal actually makes for a much cleaner sounding wedge.
So you're layering it in, but you're only layering the frequencies to get extra volume that aren't feeding back.
Just on the channel, just on that vocal channel, not to the overall output of that wedge. So makes my job a lot easier.
That makes sense.
So
I'm
very careful about compression with monitors. If you squash that vocal mic, which then has the possibility of feeding back, it makes feedback a lot more possible because it's taking all that background noise and raising it as well, and which is then getting picked up by the mic a lot easier, and it again just allows for feedback a lot easier. So just be careful with compression if you're using it on monitors. So.
I guess just as like a general rule of thumb between you and front of house, or just whatever, I guess in general, do you worry about phase issues a lot between front of house and monitor mixes at all? Or does it not even get close to a point where that becomes a thing?
Not really. I'm lucky in that some of the systems I get to work on are like just absolute top of the line at one of the venues that I work at. We have an L Acoustics rig, and it is like one of the best sounding PAs I've ever heard in my life. And it's got a lot of rear rejection on it.
Gotcha.
So it helps a lot in that regard. But so a lot of the stage noise, again, comes from wedges, and it comes from amps and drums. So that's something I'm also monitoring during sound check, is I have a dB meter up, making sure I try to stay around 100, which is probably a bit light, but a lot of the shows I'm working are metal shows, and they definitely can go over that. I've been on stages where it's been consistently 120 dB, and it is punishing. And those also tend to be the people who are just like, I need more, I need more, I need more, because they can't hear anything. So that goes back to just that game of, I need more of this. Oh, it's negating this, so I need more of that too. And so just being conscious about what you need to get through the performance, especially if you're on wedges. I find wedges to be extremely utilitarian. You're just going to get what you need.
Yep.
Or you should just get what you need, and that's it. Yeah. In-ears, on the other hand, I guess we could start talking about in-ears.
Yeah.
What are in-ears?
Yeah. In-ears are basically earbuds that ideally will block out a lot of sound. And it's also a high quality way to be able to hear your mix. I find this to be a much better solution to live sound monitoring than wedges. But we're at the point where these can be kind of costly, and not everybody can afford them. And plus, not everybody can afford to have an engineer running an in-ear rig for them every night.
Because they do take more time to set up than a wedge.
Absolutely.
They do. There are a lot of bands that I work with that definitely negate this. They will buy an in-ear rack mixer and basically have an engineer, or they might do it themselves, set up a mix ahead of time, and they will have an input split in this rack. So they will have tails that feed to front of house, and then you patch everything into the front of this. Goes to their console too, so that way it's consistent every night. Everything's labeled input-wise. And that's why I much prefer monitors. Not only do I get to have more fun as an engineer, I get to process things completely differently. More like a studio mix or even a front of house mix, but I get to have some fun. I get to use reverb. I get to put delay into a mix.
Get effects in the ears.
You can't do that in a wedge.
No.
You can't do that. So I've worked shows with people who've done in-ears, and I've had they just seem much happier, and they're able to deliver a better show. I feel like
So they can hear exactly what they need to hear.
And as an engineer, I always feel much more satisfied with an in-ear mix. I feel I'm able to do more with an in-ear mix, but that's just me. I'm sure there are some guys out there who struggle with in-ear mixes and feel like they can kill. Yeah, some people feel that way for sure. I personally don't feel that way. I work with musicians that have not felt that way. I definitely feel like there is a sentiment that the people who are used to wedges don't like in-ears, whether they've tried them or not. And I do know some people who have tried them and are like, I don't like these. I like feeling that push of the guitar amp behind me.
The air and everything, right?
Even though it makes for a significantly louder stage. But there are tricks to negate the very isolating feeling. Most bands who are on ears that come through will use like audience mics. They'll have condensers pointed at the audience to give them a sense of space. Or again, using things like reverb are huge in monitors, just not making everything sound so dry. So there definitely is a bit more preparation that could go into an in-ear mix. And when you're working with a band specifically and touring with them, that I think is definitely perfect for that environment.
If you're a band that has a dedicated monitor engineer that travels from place to place with you, it is definitely beneficial to have an in-ear rig, have a split snake, have something that you have consistency across. Because, as you mentioned, you are with someone who's familiar with getting that live sound that makes it so it's not so isolating, that keeps it consistent, but also it allows you to rehearse with your ears, and you will have nearly an identical duplication of that when you go and perform. So you're familiar with it. A lot of times people who, in my experience, try ears and don't like them is because they've been using wedges for a long time, and as a gut reaction of this is different. How do you recommend rehearsing with them and performing with them at least a handful of times to really start to learn the benefit of it?
It's actually great that you bring this up because I'm dealing with this right now with a band. I'm building an in-ear rack for some friends of mine who are in a band. I introduced their drummer to wired in-ears, and he did one performance of it, and he was like, "This is it. I'd need to play like this from now on." And the rest of the band seems a little unsure about it. But it's really just asking them to be open to it. Just give me the chance we'll try a bunch of different stuff. And if we don't find anything you like, then we'll scrap it. But it's just, again, using your ears, communicating, listening. It's listening to what they're saying. And again, maybe the words that they're saying might not mean what they actually need to mean, but trying to see those needs and meeting them. And I think that's what we do as engineers. There's a lot of, I'm sure you guys can speak to this in the studio environment. A lot of times people will ask for something and it's not actually quite what they want, but you know what they're talking about. So, just trying to not force it on them, but just, if you're in an environment where you can show them what it's all about, then, because I truly do think that ears have tons to offer, and they are the future of monitoring on stage. I think there truly will come a time where we won't be using wedges.
I can believe it. For sure.
It's just going to become too convenient.
All we need is that AI receiver that connects to the board that gives them exactly what they need in their ears. And then it's all taken care of.
Don't have a job anymore. Perfect.
It's going to happen, though. It's going to happen.
Yeah, well.
There'll be a way to work it out. Oh, man.
Hopefully I get a career in before that.
There you go. There
is something that I have seen from time to time that is one way to transition to full monitors, but also is another approach that is different from wedges or in-ears, and that is kind of like the hybrid setup. I have had my personal experience doing live, which isn't as vast, but I have had artists who have a good amount of cheap wireless for everyone on the stage to then have a separate in-ear mix as well as a stage mix where it's really just, okay, I have all the things that help me, but I don't need in my ears. And they have one in, one out, or just one earpiece, and then everything that I need in my wedge. So I just have vocal in my wedge. But everything else that I would like to hear, like the backing guitar, the bass, the things like that, are in my in-ear. And then, or just a full front of house mix even. I've seen people take a full front of house mix and they can just blend the two together. So it's like, man, I really want to hear more, get more of this energy going on, just blend in more of that full front of house mix or their custom everything mix. But it doesn't interfere with what they really need to hear, which is just that vocal, and allows for a semi-clean stage, but still some of that clarity that you get from in-ears. Bands that have been doing this for a long, long time. If they do in-ears, oftentimes I will see that. Or they'll ask if they can do both. It does take more prep. It does take more time, unless once again, you're just getting a direct feed from front of house that you can then control, or audience mics that you can just control for the ambience of it. But that's kind of a hybrid thing. I don't know how often you've seen that. I see it a handful of times every year.
Not quite in the way that you're describing it. I've seen it where, again, they want that force of that guitar amp or that kick drum. So maybe they want that in a wedge and they'll feel that regardless. And then they still have all the articulation in their ears. I personally worry about having one in-ear out and one in-ear in. I'm not an expert on this, so I don't know if there truly is science behind this, but I do wonder if you might be more inclined to get hearing damage on one ear as opposed to the other.
Most definitely.
So that's another upside to ears that I should have said. But yeah, it can really negate a lot of hearing loss that a lot of older musicians have nowadays, that they're used to playing on stages where it's just blasting noise. I've heard Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey of The Who talk about how deafeningly loud their stages were. And Pete Townsend, I think, is almost, if not completely deaf in one of his ears. Yeah, that's terrible to be a musician.
Absolutely.
So
They can have drastically lower volumes. Plus, they make really nice earbuds, some for a lot, some for not so much, where they get custom fittings of your ear cavity to be as efficient at blocking out external sounds as possible.
100%.
And once again, if you have your own in-ear rig, you can combat that isolatingness of completely blocking it out, have a lower volume going into your ears with more articulation, with more control, and keep your hearing. Because especially if you're in a long multi-hour performance, or even if you're just the last one on the set and you're there for the other acts, or you're there at the beginning and you're there for later acts, like, protect your hearing. Earplugs and in-ears are great at helping that. Even if you are using wedges, having earplugs on stage is not a bad idea.
I would still be careful with that too. Again, going back into the idea of introducing feedback, because you might negate some of the sound level's going to decrease on stage, and then you're not going to be able to hear your wedge as much. So just keep in mind that maybe put them in every once in a while or something. If you truly can't hear what's going on, that might be something to think about. But in-ears forever.
Now, is in-ears something you put on a stage plot or a tech rider or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's going to drastically change how I'm preparing for the event. Now, again, I'm a house guy at a venue, so I come in every day and my consoles and my amps are patched the same every day. I don't have to set up and tear them down. There are some venues that I work at, however, where we do have to strike everything off the stage at the end of the night. So our monitor world specifically has to be set up every time. So if it's wedges, I'm preparing completely differently. I've got to set up external amps that feed from my console, and then to the actual wedges. That's something I don't have to do if it's in-ear monitors. I just have to have a space for the rack to set up, maybe to put an antenna or two. So
right on.
Yeah.
Ears are just easier. They're better.
Easier,
They're just
man.
better. They're just better.
Well, fair enough. You heard it from the source himself.
That's right.
I'm right.
And he's right, damn it. No, that's definitely a good... thank you for coming here and having this conversation with us, because it's definitely something that is talked about often, because they both do have positives and negatives. But at the end of the day, if you're doing this often and you are dedicated to it, making that in-ear plunge can definitely be something that is incredibly beneficial down the line, just for saving your hearing alone. And there are tons of ways to do it.
Yeah, if you're a small band playing lots of shows and not happy with the consistent mix every night, highly recommend investing in some ears. If you know any engineers, maybe have them set it up for you. Just take a day or two and just really just run your set and help him or her dial in your mix. Just get it the exact way you want it. I think you can get a lot more out of ears monitoring wise than you can in a wedge.
I do have one last thing I want to get your opinion on. So there are setups, like let's say you are a band that has your whole rig that you take with you to your shows, which increasingly is more common, where a band also has a PA, a mixing console, and things like that. If you are running in-ears and you have, like, let's say, example, a Behringer X32, and then you've got the P16s or whatever monitor controls on stage, or you're using a digital mixer that has monitoring app functionality so that everyone in the band can specifically control their in-ears or control their monitor mixes. There are positives and negatives of doing this. I think it is personally, I think that is a great tool, but it's also an incredibly slippery slope. If you are using wedges and you are controlling your own monitor mix, you can very quickly get yourself in trouble. So that might be best to, if you're doing that, definitely I would say switch to in-ears, because then it's harder to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, and a lot of these apps for these mixers, speaking of the Behringer Wing, praise be, they have a Q-Mix app on there where all you get access to is volume for your channels for your mix. That's it. So you can't adjust compression or anything like that. In some applications, this is very useful. In other applications, this might be a huge pain in the butt.
Yeah.
But Behringer also has another app where you can go in and tweak it separately if you need that. But yeah, I would suggest just having the levels that you need in front of you and changing that. I definitely recommend artists use like these P16s if that's what you want to go for. Keep in mind that's going to be a thing that's on stage, and maybe you want to give a sense of artifice with your performance, and maybe you don't want that on stage too. So that's something to think about. But for drummers especially, when they're sitting, and a lot of times I'll see them, they'll have like a little table next to them, maybe a little dedicated mixer, having a phone or a tablet or something right there with all your channels on it. That would, I could see a lot of people really liking that workflow. So, and me as an engineer, at the end of the day, I just want my artists to have as good of a mix as they can. So if that means that they have an app in front of them where they're making tweaks per song, especially being a house guy, I don't know their set. I don't know. I might listen to them ahead of time just to get an idea of what kind of music it is, but I don't know what their set's going to be ahead of time. I don't know what each song is going to require. So if a band came through and was utilizing house, and also had access for their ears for each channel, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. Something to be aware of if you are going this route, especially if you have your own setup and you have your own affordable digital board to control your front of house and your monitor mixes. A lot of times it takes extra steps, if possible at all, to separate the channels that are going to your in-ears versus going to front of house, which is why Joe brought up earlier that you would just adjust volume. You wouldn't go in and adjust compression or EQ or effects or things like that. Because in a lot of situations, especially on the more affordable entry-level boards, that will affect the mains. So just to keep that in mind as well.
And make sure you have that on your tech writer.
There you go.
For sure. All right. I think that's all I got.
I think that's all I got too. Yeah.
Mixing,
Yeah.
I got no more left in me.
Joe is drained dry. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for talking about monitor mixing and in-ears and whatnot.
Thanks for having me, guys. Blessed to be
It's always a fun time, Joe.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I know you don't really have many plugs or things that you
at the moment
for yourself.
Go reach out to these guys to get your stuff mixed and mastered.
Wow, he plugged us.
He did.
It's really
I
nice.
feel plugged right now.
Why don't you guys tell them more about what kind of services you guys offer?
Yeah, Brandon, tell them about Studio 2.
Yeah, so I offer recording, mixing, and mastering services for any kind of audio. I love working with audio, so if you have something you need done, just hit me up and we can talk about your project. You can go to studio222recording.com and get a hold of me there. Sean, where can they find more about you?
I love how you just went like so soft. Like, yeah, I offer mixing and mastering services. And,
it's late night hours.
The show's over. Monitoring is done.
We're chilling.
We're chilling.
ASMR.
If you want chill recording, mixing, and mastering, you can hit me up at. I'm not doing that. At SWS Recordings, I focus on indie, folk, rock, and blues. Those are my main genres. I also do arts development. So if you want to basically have what this podcast is, but more specialized and focus on your music and your career to help you take those necessary steps moving forward, hit me up. Also at swsrecordings.com. Also for the podcast in general, you can follow us on pretty much every platform. If you're listening to this on Spotify or on other audio platforms, we also have this video podcast posted every week to YouTube. You can check us out there. We also have TikTok, Instagram, things like that for kind of extra stuff or behind the scenes stuff. So if you're just an audio listener, definitely check out some of our more video focused platforms because we have things that are not on this audio podcast, like bi-weekly updates on the music industry, or if something big happens, we'll talk about it. Some different new gear things or behind the scenes things or merch ideas and just stuff like that, all around audio related.
That's right.
Industry stuffs. So that being said, from our kitchen to yours.
Bon appetit.